166 square miles and 1 smile wide, and we're open to the world. Barbados, that is. But sometimes there might be some people who may want to come here and they might find that there are some little bit of difficulties. So we're going to look at some of those and how we can make Barbados more fully accessible to everyone.
Did you just quote John King?
That was John King?
I think so.
Oh, he's a great philosopher. Good morning, I guess, and let's welcome to talk about a fully accessible Barbados. First of all, let's welcome back Senator Carrie-Ann Ifield.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Seems like it's yesterday we were talking.
Just about.
Yeah. Good to have you back, though. And we welcome Dr. Scott Rains. He's an international consultant on exclusive tourism. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Should I say welcome to Barbados?
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, you'll be one of the first to say that because it's a first trip for me.
Well, we like to be first. Welcome to Barbados. All right, so maybe we can start with the home girl, Senator Carrie-Ann Ifield. This whole concept of a fully accessible Barbados. Where's its genesis?
Its genesis is in the fact that Barbados is a tourism economy. We know that. We do provide lots of service. But persons with disabilities in Barbados are often excluded from that service, not just visitors, but persons who actually live here. And so around 2005, we thought about a project that could impact on the landscape of Barbados. And so we started looking at how we could make it, and we decided the name would be Fully Accessible Barbados, or as we say, we want to make it FAB.
Fab.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
we want it to be FAB. But as we went through it, we realized that we couldn't tackle everything. So we revamped it, and around 2008 we relaunched. The late Prime Minister David Thompson presented the first fully accessible Barbados accreditation plaques, and this was towards the tourism economy. We started focusing more on that segment of the community for now, but the point is we're seeing spin-offs, because if you have the hotels and the restaurants accessible, the taxis have to be accessible, the transportation needs to be, Bridgetown has to upgrade, the city centres, all of those different shopping malls, everything has to be accessible. So it's a spill-off effect, and not only our visitors but our local persons will benefit from it. We accredit people in 6 areas, meaning we evaluate to see which types of disabilities you can cater for, because we know in Barbados we have older buildings, so everybody can't put in an elevator, say, everybody can't put in the ramps, but everybody can do things to access somebody. So that's what we're looking at, to make everywhere as accessible as possible. We're in the starting process. Being fully accessible Barbados accredited doesn't mean that everybody and everything is going to be perfect. It simply means that you've started to make steps in the right direction.
Okay. Our other guest, who is visiting Barbados for the first time, as he says, he has an interesting quote here that I like. It says, "My passion is social change with an IT toolkit. My professional experience spans a number of domains. One of them, of course, management in nonprofits and higher education. The other, consulting and travel and disability." Now, that's a lot to take in, but I like the quote. So tell me about this social change with an IT toolkit.
Well, for the last 15 years at least, I've been working with underserved populations in the United States, whether those are seniors or immigrants or people of low income, children after school, because I live in Silicon Valley. So your last guest, he's talking about my neighbors when he's talking about Steve Jobs and Wozniak Way. So I've lived in an area where I've seen what technology can do. Being a person with a disability, I have a special take on that, and I'm looking always what it can do for my community. And the social change part is, how can I take the tools that are there and use them to bring more economic opportunity to people with disabilities, to bring our vision. We see the world a little bit differently when we see it from 3 feet off the ground, or when we don't see it at all. We experience it differently, and we think we have some richness to give to the world.
All right, so of course you're here for a seminar that is going to be held, well, a lecture that is going to be held on inclusive tourism, a worldview, Barbados vision. So, Senator Carrie-Ann Ifield, can you tell us about that lecture?
Certainly. It's a part of a series of activities we're going to be having. Tomorrow morning we start off with a tourism symposium that's sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism for the persons in the tourism sector. But the public lecture, that's tomorrow evening. It's going to be at the George Lamon Pedagogical Center, which is up by the Earl Barrows Center for Creative Imagination, KFIL. And basically what we're going to be talking about is what is going on internationally with regards to inclusive tourism and how we can make this a part of the vision for Barbados going forward. Dr. Rains is going to deal with that, and I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy hearing all the things he has to say, because he's just coming out of a really harrowing, very grueling, but very successful Congress in Brazil on inclusive tourism. So he's got a lot to offer and talk about.
You brought in. Go ahead.
Dr. Rains, we just heard Senator Eiffel spoke about the fact that there's going to be some sort of certification to places, and that not every place can do some of the things. And there are different types of disabilities, of course. Some that we can pick up immediately, and then there are others you were telling me that you just don't know about. So as far as from listening to what she was saying, what do you think about the thrust that started in Barbados, and how can you relate it to the rest of the world? What's happening in the rest of the world?
Well, actually, because of the technology and because the senator is very fluent in technology and a good researcher, I've actually known about fully accessible Barbados from very early on. So I've been very pleased to see how how you've created your different types of certification, the different sectors. It makes good logical sense, and the approach makes good sense in terms of focusing on a particular group, giving a range of levels of certification, and I think there's a good logic to the whole program, and that is when you make yourself accessible in the tourism sector, you're getting it paid for by me, right? It doesn't come out of the government coffers. I mean, over time, of course, it's paid back. It does originally, perhaps, or out of a business person's pocket. So I think it's been a really good plan. I think it has an awful lot of potential.
Do you see any room for development, or, you haven't had?
Well, there's always an advantage when a country has its own standards that are law.
Right.
And then there's a disadvantage. And here's the disadvantage in the United States, where we have really strong laws. We have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we have building codes that go around that. And people will go down the checklist and say, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. And they'll stop. And they'll think that they've done everything that could possibly be done, when the law is only the absolute minimum, without which we'd throw them in jail if they didn't do it. And so there's a definite advantage to an approach like this, where you have to use your imagination, and you come up with a solution that works for you, and you consult with experts like the Barbados Council for the Disabled, and you find a solution that works for you. You generate something that's natively and exclusively Barbadian, but it works.
Okay.
And I suppose there's need perhaps to change mindsets too, and the way how people look at people with disabilities. Because like you said, they might do the bare minimum and not go any further, but for regular customers, they might want to go the extra mile, when I say regular here. So is there a need for mindset changes, you think?
Definitely. Definitely. Sometimes we say attitude is the biggest disability, because if the attitude is wrong, then it doesn't matter if you've got the other stuff in place. You may have your ramps down, you may have your lowered counters, but if the person at the counter is impatient, if you take a little long to get the pen out of the bag, if the person at the counter doesn't know how to place his signature guide, if the other persons in the line are like, why doesn't she hurry up? Why doesn't he do this? Why don't they take them in a separate room? Why don't they whatever? Then it's just as inaccessible.
Okay, Senator Eiffel, we always make time to hear from persons in the disabled community here in Barbados, and I'm sure maybe some of them are able to watch, and maybe some are listening and thinking, well, what does this mean for us who live here? So maybe you can speak to the benefits that are wrapped up in this inclusive tourism for those with disabilities living in Barbados.
Oh, definitely. When a hotel, when a restaurant becomes accessible, it's not accessible just to the tourist market. It's accessible to all persons. But it starts a chain reaction in thinking. If you're thinking about persons as customers and consumers, you start thinking about them as service providers. You start thinking about people as employees. You start sensitizing the staff. They start seeing people as people, not just wheelchair users or blind people. So that's some of the effects. Some of the other effects are, right now the council is involved in another project, Accessible School Makeover, where we're looking at making some of the schools more accessible in a variety of different ways. That's a spin-off. You've got supermarkets that are beginning to take into consideration having wheelchair trolleys and other means of access. That's a spin-off. When you look at transportation, that's a major headache in the disabled community. But when you start having more accessible vehicles, more accessible buses, stores in towns with better entries and stuff like that, when you have those things, when you have 200 people graduating from sign language classes because they want to service their customers better, it's a spin-off, because everybody is going to benefit from that. But we need people with disabilities in Barbados to also start championing the cause, you know, get involved with it, start encouraging the businesses, recommend to us places. It's not just, while we're focusing on the industry, the tourism industry, we still go out and do other places. So recommend it to us, or tell us about the places where you've had a bad experience, so we can talk to them about how they can improve their products.
All right, I don't want to sound crass with this, but you know, sometimes it just boils down to the dollar factor.
Oh, definitely.
And there are disabled people with money to spend, right?
Yes.
And you would want them to come too, right? So that is another area of appeal, right?
It definitely is. It's very interesting. In the UK, they estimate that there's about 10 million people with disabilities. I know that there's been some studies from various different countries estimating the purchasing power of people with disabilities. Well, in the United States in 2005 and again in 2007, we did a study. And at that time, there were 48 million people with disabilities, defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act in the United States. 48 million people spending $13.6 billion, with a B, on tourism, not just on clothes and groceries and everything, on tourism, traveling. And in the top 5 areas where Americans want to go, the Caribbean. So you can have a slice of that pie. Clearly it's true that disability and poverty are closely linked in all parts of the world, including in the United States. But when you've lived in a situation where I was paralyzed in 1972, the laws began to change immediately. I've been able to go on to further my education, to have a career, to accumulate money and the privilege and the time to travel. And there are thousands, millions of people like myself